All right, so yesterday we had talked about the characteristics of life. Where we left off, we had just gotten into the last two, reproduction and adaptation. So up to this point, we said all living things are made of cells, grow and develop, respond to their environment, obtain and use energy. There's two left. All living things must have the capability of reproduction. That's an important one. If a species cannot reproduce, then it cannot continue. Eventually all the members of that species die out and it's extinct. So we talked about two types of reproduction. In asexual reproduction, we basically just have one organism making a copy of itself. And the copy is basically identical. So it doesn't result in any new combinations of traits. And bacteria and some single-celled organisms, plants can reproduce asexually. Versus sexual reproduction, when you have some means of combining DNA from two different parents to form the offspring. And in that case, two parents are involved, and the offspring are unique. They're different from both parents. They have some combination of characteristics from each of them. So we say they have variation. There's some variety introduced in sexual reproduction. It's not introduced in asexual reproduction. And it's sort of common sense, but reproduction is not necessary. So these are characteristics of living things, but still something's alive if it hasn't reproduced, obviously. So it's not necessary for an individual to survive, but it is necessary for the entire species to survive. They have to be able to reproduce. So all living things are capable of reproduction. Which brings us to our last characteristic of life, adaptations. All organisms, all species on Earth, and there's millions and millions of species on Earth, they are all adapted to their environment. They have characteristics, traits, behaviors that help them to survive and to help them to be successful wherever they live. We call those traits adaptations. Okay? An adaptation is some characteristic, some trait that a species has that allows it to be successful. For example, we have up there a picture of a beaver. What are some adaptations a beaver has that allows it to be successful? Jaden?
The tail and the silks, or like the skin or the fur.
Okay, what about it? How is the tail an adaptation? What's it helpful for?
It helps it for like defense and
I don't know.
because it slaps it.
Yeah. What else? Huh?
Its teeth.
What is teeth an adaptation for?
It's to catch their prey and kill it and eat it.
Not so much catch prey, but what do they use their teeth? They're adapted to those gnawing rodent teeth, Caleb? Yeah, they cut down trees and use it to build a dam and to build their lodge where they live. So
Do they eat the wood?
no, they just cut it down to use to build those structures. So that's an adaptation. Like Jaden said, their fur is very waterproof, so they can glide through the water easily. They have webbed feet, allowing them to swim easily. So those are all adaptations that over time the species has developed that allow them to be successful where they live. Okay, so they're all adapted to their environment. Okay? And we'll talk a lot about adaptations at the end of this year. All right, just as an example here. So we have this creature with certain characteristics you can see. Let's just think about some adaptations that you may see in this organism. Tim?
Is that you?
That is not me. Why do you say that?
Is it just another you?
No. Jaden?
Mr. Mercury's brother.
I can see the resemblance, but I'm not sure actually. All right, so for example, a spiny tail would be helpful to defend against any attacks from behind. How about another one, Logan?
Oh, it looks like it has sharp teeth, so it could use its teeth
For what?
to eat prey.
Sure. Sharp teeth for capturing, killing prey. Madison?
It has wings that can fly.
Okay, how's that an adaptation?
Because if it's trying to
Okay. Wings and the ability to fly could help it escape predators. Zoe?
shell,
Shell, how would that be a helpful adaptation?
go inside the shell.
Could hide inside the shell away from predators? Yeah. So any of those things, write down one or two of those. Just that's what an adaptation is, some trait, some characteristic that allows a species to be successful.
Wait, so are we still in the first one?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's just like that. All right, so we talked about the characteristics of living things. So all living things do all 6 of the things we just listed. They all can reproduce. They all are adapted to their environment. They all respond to a stimulus. They grow and develop. They obtain and use energy, and they are all made of cells. So something's alive that exhibits all of those characteristics. Now, some things that are non-living can exhibit 1 or 2 of those characteristics. You know, a light bulb uses energy, but it doesn't reproduce. It's not made of cells and so forth. So living things do all of those, have all of those characteristics. Non-living things are missing 1 or more. All right. So now our next section of this unit time, okay, so this is all living things have those characteristics. What do all living things need in order to stay alive? And they have some common needs. First is obviously energy. So we talked about energy. And energy is very important for an organism to stay alive. Just living requires energy. Without energy, you can't stay alive. Moving obviously requires energy. Thinking, digesting, all those things need energy. Okay? So where does our energy come from? If we use humans as an example. Where do we get our energy, Charlie?
From the stuff that we eat and drink.
Yeah, for foods that we eat or drink. Now, on Earth, really, all energy can be traced back to one main source. What is that source?
The sun.
The sun. So let's say you just ate some tacos. So the taco shell, what's it made out of? Daniel? Yeah, specifically probably corn. Where does corn get its energy?
Sun.
The plant gets energy from the sun. The beef in there, what is beef made out of? Cows. Where do cows get energy?
Grass.
From grass or grain. Where did grass or grain get energy? From the sun. All energy can be traced back to the sun on Earth. Okay? So really the sun is supplying your energy through a couple steps along the way. We have to eat foods. Well, some organisms don't eat anything. The cactus I have growing over there, they don't eat anything.
Where?
Back there. So, how do they get energy? They're still alive. They still need energy. Jaden?
They don't really need water because the water's inside the cactus.
Well, they do need some water. But I'm asking about energy.
Sunlight?
Yeah, they get it from sunlight. Plants, like the cactus, like any plant, have the ability to use sunlight, absorb it, and make their own food. They make sugar with it that they use for their food. So plants use sunlight, and some other things as well as plants. Some protists, some bacteria can also use the sunlight. What do we call that process? When plants use sunlight to make their own food. The word you're going to have to know. Marley? Photosynthesis, correct. We'll talk about it. So, Plants and things like that can use the sun's energy to make food. Where do animals get their energy? Is that?
Actually, water.
No, water doesn't provide any energy actually. We still need it, but it doesn't provide energy for us. Daniel?
Food.
Yeah, from foods. So animals get it from eating maybe plants or eating other animals. That's where they get their energy. So all living things must have a source of energy. That's number one. Number two, all living things also need water. Water is extremely important. How long can you live without food? Average, human. How long, Karina?
3 weeks.
Yeah, a few weeks, probably. How long can a person live without water, Jackie?
3 days.
Just a few days. Water is very important. Without water, we can't survive. But it's not because we get energy out of the water. It's because all the chemical processes that happen in our body, they all use water. Getting rid of waste requires water. Respiration in our cells uses water. Blood and body fluid move things around our body using water. So water is extremely important. It's also important to plants. It's one of the main ingredients for a plant to be able to go through photosynthesis. Without water, they can't make their own food, and therefore they can't survive. So water is very important. Jaden?
How do you put, or how do you spell photosynthesis?
It's going to be coming up in a minute.
Okay.
All right, so all living things need food, or energy, I should say. All living things need water. Living things also need, now this is sort of a strange way to phrase it, but we say air. Do fish need air?
No.
Technically, I would say no, but we're going to get a little more specific. What do fish actually need?
Water.
Well, they oxygen. So in the air you're breathing in right now is mostly
Carbon dioxide.
nitrogen.
Nitrogen.
So over 70% nitrogen.
Why?
Just is. No, our body doesn't really react with it at all. We breathe it in, we breathe it out. It doesn't affect us. Most of the air around air is a mixture of several gases. The biggest one is nitrogen. Second biggest is oxygen. Okay, carbon dioxide is down lower, and other gases as well. But when we breathe in air, we're absorbing through our lungs some of the oxygen from that air. And that oxygen goes into our lungs. Where does it go from there? Where does the oxygen go? Tim?
I have 2 questions. Or I have 2 things.
Let's answer this. Are you going to answer this?
Yes.
Okay.
It goes into your blood.
Into your blood, and that blood does what? Yeah, it delivers that oxygen to every single cell in your body. So that's how our body cells get oxygen. Every cell in our body must have oxygen. Without oxygen, they soon die. Okay? That's why if you cut off circulation to a body part, it can be very bad. Okay? And that part can die. The cells start to die because they have no oxygen, which means they can't create any energy. That's why if you choke, you can't survive. Your body needs oxygen. It's also why if your heart stops, you can't live, because your blood delivers oxygen to all your cells. And so without your blood moving, and oxygen's not getting your cells, they can't survive. So what was your question?
Is that why the air is sometimes cold? Is because the nitrogen is in
No, the air,
It's injection.
that's just a different, it's different factors that contribute to the temperature we have. All right, so we, animals, lots of things, need oxygen out of the air. What do plants use out of the air? David?
The carbon dioxide that we breathe out.
They use carbon dioxide. It's another gas that's in the air that plants need for photosynthesis. It's the main ingredient in photosynthesis. So they need carbon dioxide. They do need some oxygen as well, though. They use both. So all living things need something. Now when I talk about fish, well, they don't quite need air, but they need oxygen from the water.
If there's oxygen underwater, how come we can't breathe?
It's a good question. Because our lungs are not adapted, so fishes have gills, which are specially adapted to get pulling the oxygen out of water. Our lungs are not able to do that.
So if I had whatever it's called. like-
Gills? Yeah.
Then you.
Madison?
If like someone stayed
Then
underwater,
be like-
What?
if someone stayed underwater for a long time, they adapt to water.
No.
You die.
Because again, and this goes along with what we're talking about adaptations, is that we said beavers are adapted to their environment they live in. Fish are adapted to living in the water. If you take a fish out of the water, can it adapt to breathe air? No, it's just gonna die. You can't develop new adaptations just because like it would be helpful, okay? You have those characteristics or you don't.
What if you breed it with a land animal, a fish land
They
animal?
don't. Two species cannot interbreed.
Can someone be born to be adapted to water?
All right. So all living things need food or energy, they need water, and they need gases from the air. They also need an area to live that will provide them with all of these different needs. A living space. A living space that has enough energy, that has enough water, that has the air that they need. So that's also important. And the one that looks just like this. Up here. And so there are times when you have several species trying to get the same resources, living in the same area. And we have a name for that. Do you know what we would call that?
A famine?
No. Let's say we have a limited amount of grass. No, limited amount of frogs that 3 different species of birds want to eat. And it's a limited number. What are they going to do? There's not enough for all of them. What? Yeah, but there's not enough frogs for all of them to go along. Sorry? Maybe, but what if they can't find anything else, Madison?
They don't fight each other.
Yeah, we call that competition, right? Competition is when several species are trying to get the same thing. Competition is also why you weed your garden. If you're trying to grow some tomatoes at home in your garden, okay, you go out there every few days and pull out all the weeds. What you're doing is you're reducing the competition for water and nutrients with your tomato plants. If you just let all the weeds grow, well, they're going to be getting some of the water. They're going to be competing with your tomato plants to get water and nutrients. And so your tomatoes aren't going to grow as well because they're competing. All right, so all living things need a living space. And our last need, all living things only are able to survive under proper temperatures. And so, if we think about animals, animals have developed different ways of dealing with this. Some animals are warm-blooded, some are cold-blooded. Do you know the difference between those two things? Michael?
Cold-blooded have to be in like warm areas, and warm-blooded could be in cold.
Yeah, they can. They're little warm-blooded animals have a wider range of temperatures they can live at. What else, Lonnie?
Warm-blooded is a constant temperature, and warm-blooded can change with the surroundings.
Cold-blooded. Yeah, exactly. Warm-blooded animals, they maintain, just like Lonnie said, a constant body temperature. They have ways of generating heat internally. They have ways of getting rid of excess heat so that their body temperature stays about the same. Humans and other mammals are warm-blooded. What body temperature do humans generally maintain? Jackie? What's that?
98.
Yeah, 98.6 is what we say normal human body temperature is. And as long as you're healthy, even if you go out on a day when it's 30 degrees out, your body temperature is still going to be 98.6. Or if you go out and it's 105 degrees out, Your body temperature will stay at 98.6. We maintain a constant body temperature. That process that keeps it at the right level is called homeostasis, keeping constant conditions. And so our bodies have lots of ways of doing this. And if you think about it, some of them are internal, some are behavioral. Let's say you're outside without a jacket and the wind picks up and you're really cold. How does your body react? What do you start to do? Billy? Shiver. And shivering is your muscles contracting very quickly, which generates body heat. Using your muscles makes heat, that warms you up. Or if you're outside and you're playing field hockey for an hour and a half and it's 100 degrees out, and you're running around, to maintain that body temperature 98.6 when it's hot out, what does your body do? Michael?
Sweat.
Sweats. And when sweat evaporates from your skin, it removes heat, so it keeps your body temperature at the right level. If you think about it, there's some are behavioral. It's getting cold now, and let's say your parents, they don't want to turn on the heat in your house, yeah, right? So it's really cold in your bedroom, and you just have still a thin little blanket on your bed from the summer. So if you're really cold at night, how do you sleep? What position do you sleep in? Kayla? All like curled up in a tiny little ball, and what you're doing, your body's behaving that way without you thinking about it, is it's trying to keep all of your body heat in nice and close. It's reducing your surface area. But then you don't have air conditioning in your room upstairs and it's 100 degrees out. How do you sleep on those days? Yeah, just like completely spread out right here. You're trying to maximize your surface area so as much heat as possible can dissipate from your body and cool you down. All right, so that's what warm-blooded animals do. Cold-blooded organisms are different. How are they different? Well, I guess Lonnie told us their body temperature fluctuates or changes depending on their surroundings. And so cold-blooded animals, like in the winter when the lake is frozen, okay, the fish are underneath the ice in the water, which is 33 or 34 degrees. And their body temperature drops way, way down to 34 or 35 degrees. Okay, so their body temperature depends on their surroundings. And so they can survive under there, but what are they like in those conditions? You don't know. Are they swimming all around and looking for food and everything? Then what are they doing?
They're like solitary. They'll stay in like one place.
They basically do nothing. Their body temperature is so low, they're very, very inactive. Their heart rate slows way down. The amount of oxygen they need goes way down. So they don't really need to do much during those times. They can't be active at those temperatures.
But how would they still like going to eat, right?
They do, and they can live off stored energy that they had, so that they don't need to eat very much in the winter because there's not really much food for them. So their body temperature, and as it gets warm, their body temperature increases as the ice melts, as the lake gets warmer, and then they can start to become more active. Right? Also, some cold-blooded animals have some behavioral adaptations to help them moderate their body temperature. You know, if you've ever been, like, I don't know, Florida or something, and those little anola lizards that are all around. In the morning, after a cool night, when it's morning time, where do those lizards go?
I've seen them
On walls, on screens, on rocks, on a sidewalk. What they're doing is putting themselves in an area where they can absorb as much heat as possible so their body temperature can come back up. And in a really hot middle of the day, you don't see them around because they hide. They go in the water. They go in the shady area so that they don't overheat. So they can move from place to place to sort of try to adjust it, but they can't regulate it internally. They only do it using those behaviors. Skip that. All right, our last thing. Let's just read about this to prepare us for tomorrow. This is an experiment done by Van Helmont, I think John Baptiste Van Helmont, I think in the early 1800s. And here's the experiment that Van Helmont did. And this is exactly what he wrote. If you press a piece of underwear soiled with sweat together with some wheat in an open mouth jar, after about 21 days, the odor changes, and the ferment coming out of the underwear, penetrating through the husks of wheat, turns into mice. What is more remarkable is that mice of both sexes emerge, and these mice successfully reproduce with mice born naturally from parents. What's even more remarkable is that the mice which come out of the wheat are not small mice, not even miniature adults or aborted mice, but adult mice emerge. So Van Helmont actually did this experiment. He took some sweaty underwear, he put it with some wheat in a big open jar, and left it for 21 days. And what he observed was mice coming out of it. And therefore, he said he had proved that sweaty underwear mixed with wheat can turn into mice.
For real?
I'm doing
So,
That's strange.
is that true?
No.
Can you go home and recreate this experiment? Find some wheat, put it with your sweaty underwear from the day, give it 3 weeks, and it'll turn into mice?
Timmy, yeah.
What was probably actually going on when Van Helmont did this experiment?
He's a footballer.
Grace?
Mice crawled into the jars.
Yeah, 21 days, probably the mice were attracted to the wheat and the smell of the sweaty underwear. At some point when he didn't see them, had crawled into the jar, and when he was looking 21 days later, he saw them coming out. What was wrong with the way he set up this experiment? Tim?
Well, he didn't like wash it. He just left it. If he
Okay.
had watched it, he could have seen that the mice were climbing into the jar.
You can't watch it for 21 days. There's something else. Fazia?
The jar was open.
Yeah, the jar was open. If you had just covered it with even like a net or a screen, would any mice come out?
No.
No. Okay, but he didn't do that. So this may sound silly to us, but it's a theory called spontaneous generation that people used to believe fully in. That sometimes, under certain conditions, non-living material could turn into something that was alive. Why would they think that? Well, they saw things like Van Helmont did. They saw that if you left a piece of meat out, eventually maggots started to appear on that meat. And there were none before. They thought that the meat turns into maggots after a certain amount of time. They saw that in the springtime, frogs just came out of the mud, and there were no frogs there all winter long, but they just emerged from the mud. They thought that the mud turned into frogs. They saw when you left a piece of bread out, eventually it turned into some living creature, this mold that grew and was hairy and green and so forth. They thought that the bread was turning into this mold. We know today, obviously, that this is not true. Living things don't come from non-living things.
Wait, I did finish reading it.
Yeah.
Bread turning into mold. Frogs coming out of the mud. Meat turning into maggots.
Are we done writing?